Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Slovenian Museum and Archives, where we are having the exhibit about Jože Plečnik due to 150th year of his birth that happened last year. However, we have the exhibit right now here. The exhibit that we have is thanks to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Foreign and European Affairs. The General Consulate acquired the money through the Cultural Fund, and that we could translate, that this could be translated, this could be designed anew, and then printed and sent to us. So we are very thankful, and to the Ministry of Culture as well, to the Museum, obviously, of Architecture and Design that designed this. So thank you very much to everybody. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Noah Charney, who answered some questions about Plečnik on one of our discussions over the internet that you are going to see just now. Dr. Noah Charney is a professor, writer, author of many books, including the monography about Jože Plečnik, which was his PhD. So he's going to talk a little bit about this, and you should listen to it because it's very, very informative. And then later on, I'm going to talk to Greg Noson, our custodian here at the Slovenian Museum and Archives, about the feelings that he has about Plečnik and I have about Plečnik, and we're going to talk shortly about that as well. Enjoy.
Hello, Dr. Noah Charney here. I'm a professor of art history and author of almost 20 books now, and I did my PhD dissertation on Jože Plečnik. I discovered Plečnik when I was doing a Eurailing trip when I was still a student, and I came to Ljubljana and I saw this miraculous set of buildings that seemed to have a coherent style to them before I knew that they were all by the same architect. Most people who come to Ljubljana and who have an open mind to the aesthetic see the architecture of Jože Plečnik and can't help but fall in love with it. Plečnik has more of an influence on Ljubljana than, for instance, Antoni Gaudi had in Barcelona. He was really the genius loci of Ljubljana, and back in 1895, Ljubljana suffered a devastating earthquake. 15% of the center of the city was damaged, and it was fortuitous that Plečnik came of age at a time when he could be commissioned to rebuild much of the city from an urban design standpoint, and also most of the key buildings that are really eye-catching were designed by him. One of the things that is particularly distinctive is that Ljubljana truly has the imprint of a single architectural mind. There are some cities like Brasilia that were the entire construct of a single architect, but that's extremely unusual. And Ljubljana has the good fortune to have been rebuilt by the single greatest Slovenian artist in any medium, and certainly in architecture. Plečnik, for architectural historians, is a hidden gem. He isn't as well known as perhaps he should be. He did not begin or join any of the major modernist movements, Siam, you name it. He didn't work in New York or London or Paris. He chose to return to Ljubljana, which is where he grew up, and really transform it from what he described as a cultural backwater into a proper city. He envisioned it as a new Athens. And in fact, he managed to get commissions, though he couldn't have planned it this way, for all of the major public buildings that would have been in a Greek polis. That is to say, Pantheon, a marketplace, the Parthenon, a stadium, an amphitheater. All of these aspects that would be in a Greek city, he managed to rebuild in Ljubljana. And oddly enough, if you believe in fate or mysticism, you might consider this less than a coincidence, but if you walk in a straight line from his house in Ljubljana to the stadium, you pass through, as the crow flies, almost every building that he built. I wound up writing my dissertation on Plečnik, the life and art of the man as a modernist mystic, and he was interested in all aspects of the history of art, but he didn't do anything derivatively. He didn't copy and paste different historical styles. He absorbed each one and made them his own. There's a German word Stimmung, which basically means the vibe that something projects, the aura, and there's no good translation for it. But he tried to absorb the Stimmung of different historical periods and produce his own versions of them that still had this resonance of the historical period in them. I wound up writing this PhD on the subject, and it was published here as the book called Eternal Architect, The Life and Art of Jože Plečnik, Modernist Mystic. And what I like about his architecture is that it is really lived in Ljubljana. His buildings are all active. They still function beautifully even in the digital age. You can't help but feel that you're in Plečnik's Ljubljana. And there are spaces that still function just as well now as when he constructed them. And that's maybe one of the key points of great timeless architecture, is that somehow the architect manages to envision future adaptations, theorize them, and create buildings that function no matter what the future holds. They're future-proofed buildings, and Plečnik as an example of that. For example, the National and University Library, it works beautifully today, just as well as it did when it was built after the Second World War. So Plečnik is very much the symbol of Ljubljana. Ljubljana is a city without a single iconic structure. If you have a vibe of Ljubljana, it is a Plečnik vibe, even though no individual one of his buildings became the city's icon the way Sagrada Familia became the icon of Barcelona, or the Eiffel Tower and Notre Dame in Paris. And perhaps that's better. He wasn't a one-hit wonder. He was someone who created Stimmung of a space. The vibe that we feel in Ljubljana is really the Plečnik vibe. And I think that's a more sophisticated approach than most architects take. So thank you for your interest and your interest in Jože Plečnik, and I hope to see you someday in Slovenia.
So Luca, how do you want to begin? Noah, I thought, offered a beautiful 5-minute introduction, to Plečnik, as of course he can, knowing everything that he knows about Plečnik. But there's still a lot of, ground that we could cover in the time that we have together. And one of the things that we were talking about, or have been talking about over the last week or so, is what it's like to live within, either grow up in, go to school in, work, live, play within the environment that Plečnik created in Ljubljana. It's one thing to be a tourist, I imagine, which is my experience, but another thing to live with this architecture day in and day out. What has that felt like to you?
That's an extremely good question, and as we were talking before, I was thinking then at home, what does it mean to me, and what does it mean to Slovenians, and especially people in Ljubljana, even though Plečnik was all over Slovenia, but his special love was obviously Ljubljana. And I have to say that walking around the city, it has that kind of feeling that you have inside. However, when you start to really notice it, when somebody says so many times to you, "Oh, this was Plečnik's work," or "This, you should look at that," then you start to realize, then you start to see it. Then you start to see it everywhere that he did anything, and we know that that's a bunch of things that he managed to do in Ljubljana. And so for me, the feeling of walking under the arcade, so under the Plečnik's marketplace, that he did, is unbelievable. You just walk and walk and walk, and you think you're gonna walk forever, because it kind of turns with the river. So with that, I think that for me, looking at the river Ljubljanica and how he managed to incorporate the architecture both of the Plečnik's marketplace and then the Trnovo bank as well, and then all of the different places where he incorporated Ljubljanica into the design of Ljubljana. So he didn't try to, Ljubljanica for the longest period of time people tried to regulate it because it was flooding. They tried to regulate it for 250 years. Yeah, and the thing is that he didn't just regulate it. He regulated the height with, for example, with the floodgates that he did that are also extremely beautiful. But he managed to do also to think about what height Ljubljanica should be in the center of the city. So it's not too low, too high, too whatever. Yeah. Everything was wholesome. Everything had both, of course, function and form and some meaning and aestheticism of itself. So this is what I think about whenever I walk through Ljubljana. Now I'm also gone for 15 years already. I return to Slovenia often. However, each time that I go through Ljubljana, it's unbelievable what kind of small details you can see. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about the river as as a natural object that he used as both a point of departure, but then also a kind of an ingredient, an architectural ingredient in what exists, I think in some ways as what you could call a total work of art. I mean, Plečnik might have wanted it to be, I know that he wanted it to be more total, than he was able to make it. But to imagine, the river as a kind of an evocation of nature on the one hand, but then also as almost kind of a piece in a puzzle or an element of a painting that he could control as he imagined how things should look and how the city should be experienced, I guess.
And this goes from very minute details to the very huge scale. The parliament that never happened, the freedom, monumentally huge. But then when they were renovating the marketplace again, I've read that they were 3D scanning all of the roof tiles of it, and they found out that there were 27, not just different shapes, but different lengths. And we know also that the pillars there, when we walk under them, and when we look from afar, they're not the same size. They trick the mind. When you look at it, it tricks your mind. It seems that it is going forever and that it is much bigger than it is.
So there's this manipulation of scale within space to create particular kinds of dramatic effects. I mean, part of what I've been thinking about as I've been sort of looking, at Ljubljana again and thinking about Plečnik is, on the one hand, almost the scenographic, quality of, and the dramatic quality of these spaces that he creates, both, in and of themselves, but then also as touch points within the city, from bridge to bridge along the river. And also the way in which he kind of fastens upon and reuses these particular architectural sort of signature shapes, whether it's a balustrade on the one hand, or columns of all kinds.
The shape of the columns.
Whether they're useful or not useful, they're almost more beautiful when they're not supporting anything at all. And so he develops this kind of handful of sort of signature shapes and styles, and maybe that's a bit of what you were talking about. When you were saying that once you sharpen your eye to recognizing those, then you see them everywhere as he's worked them into the fabric of the city to create something that feels coherent, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Okay.
One of the things that one of my students actually reminded me of that. I didn't know that. Of course, Slovenians even don't know everything about Plečnik, even though we think we know everything. Sure. Was from the Ursuline Church. There is sort of a stairs towards the Ursuline Church, and they have these little pillars in front of it. And if you look through these pillars, through it, over the Kongresni trg, so the Congress Market, yeah, you can capture the best photo of the Ljubljanski grad, so of the Ljubljana castle, that you can ever do. It frames it so nicely with those shapes.
No, it's interesting.
So he thought of those things, not just. So how would it look through an empty space into so framed empty space? It's just amazing to me.
It's fascinating.
So how is it for you? What were your, I don't know, best or most memorable things about Plečnik and Ljubljana when you were there?
It's interesting. I mean, because on the one hand, the last time that we were in Ljubljana, which was 2 summers ago, we spent a day with a tour guide who knew a lot about Plečnik, and that was kind of what our family wanted to do. And so on the one hand, there was my own experience of Ljubljana, but on the other, there's been stuff I've read and learned about and thought about, and wondered about in respect to Plečnik. But I have to say that my own experience of the city, I thought about it less, I think, in terms of what we've been talking about now, the fabric and the correspondences. And I thought more about it in terms of just these amazing spaces, monumental spaces, that he had a talent for building, like, the National and University, Library. I think I'm saying that right.
Yes, National University Library.
Misremembering the order of those words.
Yeah.
But the way in which he creates, something that feels, and I think this is kind of maybe speaks to his invention of a kind of a Slovenian architecture out of various other architectural histories, and impulses. So on the one hand, it feels like this huge presence, on the street, like an Italian palazzo. But on the other hand, I have heard that he compared it to sort of like a simple house in the in the karst.
Yeah.
So he uses at once, and there are also these huge, sort of Roman columns on the outside, and also on the inside. And the way he sort of mixes these monumental forms on the one hand with Slovenian materials on the other, like that gorgeous sort of almost brick kind of cladding, I guess it is, or facing that he creates out of fired brick and these stone columns and blocks of stone from the karst is unlike anything that I had ever really seen before. But then when he takes you inside and kind of moves you up into that hallway with the use of the podpech marble or whatever it's called. So where he's using Slovenian materials, but in this, in this kind of glamorous way, which kind of takes me back again to this idea of theater, because I was just a visitor in that building, but it somehow made me feel better than I was. It kind of ennobles anybody who walks into that, as he leads you from the darkness under, in the sort of basement area, into the light of that upper hallway, and then into the reading room. So it was this kind of way in which he uses architectural forms and light to create a sense of emotion and drama. And I didn't know that that's what he was aiming to do, or that he was, what he was aiming for was to make the Slovenes who were using those spaces back in the 20s and 30s feel proud. He got what he was aiming for, but it's only in retrospect that I came to appreciate how thoughtful he was about his whole program.
That movement that you did with your hands, that is exactly how I felt the first time when I came into that building. Because that building is a big part of the study in Ljubljana.
Of the university experience, like it's got to be.
Yeah, because you meet with your colleagues there, you are in that reading room and you are studying in there, and it's just that feeling, oh, now I'm somewhere where it matters. It's taking you from, and I know it sounds almost presumptuous, but the thing is that it is taking you towards somewhere where there is knowledge, where there is this amassed knowledge of Slovenia. Yeah.
It's also interesting to think about that upward motion as a kind of an analog to what he was trying to do with Slovenian architecture and aesthetics more generally, right? That I think part of the game was to do things so well, or so much better that it changed the game, and brought everyone's level of sort of sophistication and ambition up a notch, and it would also seem like he was able to accomplish that. That's not a small thing to want to do.
No, and it takes you exactly. I mean, this is again my feeling. This is very subjective right now. However, it seems like in every one of his buildings or any other objects that he made, there is this kind of path of human. So which ends, and we were talking about this before as well, which ends in Žale, so which ends in the cemetery of Ljubljana. And how did Žale make you feel, or what do you think about that?
Well, I think that, to be honest with you, what the thing we did not do when we were there was to get out to Žale.
Oh.
So you, I think, might be able to talk about how it made you feel, because I know you were there lately. But one of the things I thought was kind of fascinating about it as part of this program that he had for the city was that he created these spaces where you could learn, and you could be elevated there. He created places to play or relax, like we talked about, the ways in which he handled those sort of gorgeous curving, almost sort of esplanades or whatever you would call them in Turnavo along the river, and used willows to do that. He's able to kind of lift you up. He calms you down, and he uses this kind of vocabulary, this architectural vocabulary to do that. And one of the things I thought was amazing about Žale is that he was creating a kind of a city to help people mourn, but also to be hopeful, I think, about death. And in the process, he pulled out what feels like all the stops. He took all of these things from his bag of tricks, whether it was arches, rotundas, different sorts of seating styles, things balustrades, things we've seen in other places, but then created this sort of gorgeous place that seems like it has a quality to console.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense or if it feels like
it
that.
actually does. And when you come into this again,
it embraces you in some way.
It embraces you, and it shows the way forward.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives you the way forward where that there is obviously somebody who recently died, but you kind of get there in this monumental feeling of passage forward.
It's interesting. So it's not the end of something, but the kind of gateway into something.
Exactly, sort of. So you said also interior and everything, and all of the things. We're sitting right now on the chairs that he designed. They're not his. They are his chairs, but they're not originals, obviously. How do you feel in them?
I feel comfortable. I mean, I haven't taken a good look at this one because I'm so attracted to yours.
We can change that.
That's okay. and so that feels this almost, what is it? It's like a klismos or something like that. It feels like a Greek sort of chair form that he's kind of recycled and done something with. This one I'm less sure of, but I was looking forward to seeing these, and I want to find out about them. It's not uncomfortable.
Yeah, they're not uncomfortable.
It's not uncomfortable
no, definitely
in any
not.
way. So yeah.
His house, were you in his house by any chance?
I was in his house, which was also a fascinating place.
It was fascinating to me to see the workplace of such a great architect that he was, and yet he lived very modestly. He lived very like an ascet or something, like very.
It was a
very
monk.
modest life.
It was a monk-like setup.
Yeah.
And it did. We didn't talk a lot there about his religiosity or his Catholicism, but the guy did talk about his brother who was a priest, and the fervent Catholicism of his family. And I was thinking about that certainly as I was thinking and looking at and thinking about Jala and what he was doing there. But,
and massive amount of churches that he did in Slovenia.
Yeah, that's so. And of different, different
elsewhere as well,
sorts. And the gorgeous one in Prague as well.
Yeah, in Vienna, Ottakring, and so on.
But I think that there was something that I was reading as I was kind of thinking about this exhibition that did talk about the ways in which he saw architecture as something that it was capable of offering people some kind of salvation. Whether it was, and had a spiritual quality to it. And that was part of, the many things I think he imagined. It was possible for him to do for the people who lived in his
just
buildings.
not for his students. He
it seems like he might have been very hard.
He was an extreme workaholic, and he wanted that for his students as well. So work, and do. And they sometimes didn't like it. However, they became great architects themselves because of the constant work and constant.
Was that also
betterment.
part of the? Was that also something that had kind of a redemptive or a spiritual quality, like a kind of a spiritual discipline or something? Either that, or maybe he was just like a hard. Like a hard guy, and he pushed himself.
Yeah, pushed himself
everyone
definitely,
else,
and everybody else.
Was pushed in the process.
Exactly. So I would like to invite everybody. We are going to have this exhibit still open up until mid-March, somewhere there. You have to call first or arrange with an email that you're coming. It's best if you call Slovenian National Home and arrange something, and I'll definitely try, especially for any bigger group, to open it. However, in the Saturday, so tomorrow, the doors are going to be open also for all of the visitors of Kurentovanje parade. So please come in, please check it out if you're not here tonight. Please check it out and see what is Plečnik and what does it mean to Slovenians, and get a glimpse of that. But also I would invite everybody to visit Ljubljana and just experience it as well, because I think that is the biggest thing. You can read about it, you can watch all of the different photos and designs and everything else, and you will never get that feeling of Plečnik that you can get there daily.
It's true. And this is where to begin, and then go there and walk around, then come back and read, go there again and walk around some more. And it's, for me at least, it's the experiencing and then the endless cycle of experiencing and learning that kind of does the trick. But whatever the case is, it's been fun to work on this project with you, Luca. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure thing.